born October 1, 1924, is an American retired politician who served as the 39th President of the United States from 1977 to 1981. A member of the Democratic Party, he previously served as a Georgia state senator from 1963 to 1967, and as the 76th governor of Georgia from 1971 to 1975. As a dark horse candidate not well known outside of Georgia, Carter won the 1976 Democratic presidential nomination, and narrowly defeated incumbent Republican President Gerald Ford in the 1976 United States presidential election. In the 1980 Democratic presidential primaries, Carter took the nomination over United States Senator Ted Kennedy at the 1980 Democratic National Convention, but then lost the presidential election in a landslide to Republican nominee Ronald Reagan. Carter left office in 1981 as the only American president to serve a full term in office without appointing a justice to the Supreme Court of the United States. He is a key figure in the nonprofit housing organization Habitat for Humanity and has written numerous books, ranging from political memoirs to poetry, while continuing to comment on global affairs, including 2 books on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in which he criticized Israel's treatment of Palestinians as apartheid. Polls of historians and political scientists generally rank Carter as a slightly below average president, although his post-presidential activities are considered exceptional. When Bo Calloway was elected to the United States House of Representatives in 1964, Carter immediately began planning to challenge him. In the 1966 gubernatorial election, Carter ran against liberal former Governor Ellis Arnold and conservative segregationist Lester Maddox in the Democratic primary. In the 1970 gubernatorial election, liberal former Governor Carl Sanders became Carter's main opponent in the Democratic primary. Responding to the poll data, Carter leaned more conservative than before, positioning himself as a populist and criticizing Sanders for both his wealth and perceived links to the National Democratic Party. Leroy Johnson, a black state senator, voiced his support for Carter. "I understand why he ran that kind of ultra-conservative campaign." Georgia, 1972, Carter signed a revised death penalty statute that addressed the court's objections, thus reintroducing the practice in the state. Ineligible to run for re-election, Carter looked toward a potential presidential run and engaged himself in national politics. He was named to several Southern planning commissions and was a delegate to the 1972 Democratic National Convention, where liberal United States Senator George McGovern was the likely presidential nominee. Carter attempted to calm various conflicts around the world, most visibly in the Middle East with the signing of the Camp David Accords, 131, giving back the Panama Canal to Panama, and signing the SALT II nuclear arms reduction treaty with Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev. In an address to a fundraising dinner for the Democratic National Committee on June 23, 1977, Carter said, "I think it's good to point out tonight, too, that we have evolved a good working relationship with the Congress." Carter's remarks were met with criticism by House Republicans, who accused his comments of not befitting the formality a president should have in their public remarks. He was part of a push for deregulation of the industry, supported by leading economists, leading think tanks in Washington, a civil society coalition advocating the reform, patterned on a coalition earlier developed for the truck and rail reform efforts, the head of the regulatory agency, Senate leadership, the Carter administration, and even some in the airline industry. Carter's abrogation of the treaty was challenged in court by conservative Republicans, but the Supreme Court ruled that the issue was a non-justiciable political question in Goldwater v. Carter became the first sitting president to testify under oath as part of an investigation of him, 259-260, as a result of United States Attorney General Griffin Bell appointing Paul J. Shortly after losing his re-election bid, Carter told the White House press corps of his intent to emulate the retirement of Harry S. In the 1988 presidential election, Carter ruled himself out as a candidate once more and predicted Vice President George H. Carter endorsed Vice President Al Gore days before the 2000 presidential election, 354, and in the years following voiced his opinion that the election was won by Gore, 355, despite the Supreme Court handing the election to Bush in the controversial Bush v. Jimmy and Rosalind Carter delivered a recorded audio message endorsing Joe Biden for the virtual 2020 Democratic National Convention. In an unusual action, Carter had filed an opinion in support of the suit by environmental groups, saying the swap violated the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, ANILCA, passed in 1980 near the end of Carter's term. Carter attended the dedication of his Presidential Library 390, and those of Presidents Ronald Reagan, 391, George H. Carter's Palestine, Peace Not Apartheid, a New York Times bestseller book, published in 2006, generated controversy for his characterization of Israel's policies in the West Bank and Gaza Strip to be amounting to apartheid. Jack's son Jason Carter is a former Georgia state senator, 438, and in 2014 was the Democratic candidate for governor of Georgia, losing to the Republican incumbent Nathan Deal. Carter has been the earliest serving living former president since the death of Gerald Ford in 2006.